I can't wait for when you're home. There'll be wine and sweet recline. I close my eyes, see the sailors spend their pay. My heart cries, but I could never walk away. For my love comes from above. My Chanel, do you not know? No matter where you go, we'll walk hand in hand into our promised land. You open the door, and my world fills up with light. I'm sliced to the core, but I'm gonna do what's right. We'll drink wine, everything's just fine. My Chanel, do you not know? No matter where you go, we'll walk hand in hand into our promised land. Yeah. My Chanel, do you not know? No matter where you go, we'll walk hand in hand to our promised land. My Chanel, to our promised land. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Live at johnnylipsomstudios.co.uk. And I'm just going to pull my chair in just a little bit. Oh, we've got the loop on. Genius. I am so well prepared for tonight. I forgot to turn the loop off. There we go. Slick and professional as ever. Welcome to Sunday Night Live. And I hope everybody has had a great week. I've had a very busy week and an equally busy weekend. It was my dad's birthday yesterday, so I was over in sunny Burnt Island in Fife, just across the river from here, at my parents' place, and we had a great time. There's the Burnt Island Fair is on for pretty much the whole summer, and that basically means there are rides, there are merry-go-rounds, there are all sorts of things on. Plus, also the regional finals of the World Brass, not Brass, the World Pipe Band Championships were on. So we had various pipes and drums bands marching through Burnt Island, which is great. The kids love that kind of thing. I'm not a big fan of pipes, but certainly the drumming was superb, from little kids of 6 or 7 years old through to adults who are in their 80s and 90s who were playing, and it was just level of musicianship from all ages was outstanding. So we were there for that this weekend, and it was a great time for my dad, and for his birthday he got lots of things which are very cool, among which was Studio On 4 Professional, which I got him because he had been using Studio One 3 Prime, I think he had, and so he's been learning Studio One for a wee while. He got Studio One version 2, maybe 2014, kind of just after I got it. I set him up with a license as well, and so it was about time that he upgraded, really. So he's very happy to have that. So I spent a good 6 hours with him yesterday installing it all onto his laptop and getting him up and running. So that was pretty cool, good fun, and we've already got quite a crowd in. So I'm going to take a look at the chat. And I can see that Bobby Booth is here, Just Bob is here, Orange Shackman is here, and Dooley still is here. And Dooley is being, as usual, hilarious. He says, slow mode is on. I typed this as slow as I could. I was here 10 minutes ago. Time for a sweet recline. That's hilarious. Orange Shackman says, I agree, Just Bob. Very nice, Steely Dan-esque. Yeah, a little bit Steely Dan-esque. It's kind of Steely Dan with a Scottish twist. That's the way I like to describe it. Stephen Greenwood is here. Samuel Edwards, good to see you guys. He's here. And Beatrice, DD Entertainment, D is here. Oren deleted his post. I don't know why he did that. But yeah, we've got a wee crowd of about 14 people in, which is great. I'm very happy to be back in the saddle for Sunday Night Live. I nearly didn't start, actually, because I was getting awful crackling and popping just now, and my CPU must have been at the whiskey again. So it was going a little bit mental, but it settled down just before I pressed start streaming. So here we are, and we're using OBS for the second time, and hopefully tonight's show will go off without a hitch. We already had our first one because I forgot to turn the loop off on the song, which was brilliant. But anyway, so I hope everyone's good and had a good week and a good weekend. Oh, poor spelling, says Oren. Bad fingers. Okay. So tonight's show, what is the focus point of tonight's show? I'm trying very hard to have a focal point for every show. Because I think it would just be cooler if we have something to talk about rather than just going, okay, then let's have your questions, which is fine. And maybe we'll have shows where we do just have your questions, and that's great because I can get as many of your questions in as I can. But I think it's also good to have something that we can talk about, something that we can discuss, and it might be things that you're familiar with already, things that you know about already, or it might be things that you're less familiar with. So I don't know. It depends. I mean, you know, I think amongst the audience here we have varying skill levels, and you know, there are some techniques that some of you are going to be extremely good at, and some of you that may be less good at those particular things. We've all got our strengths and weaknesses, and we've all got things that we don't yet really fully grasp, fully know, fully understand about the wonderful world that is mixing and mastering and recording and songwriting and all of that. So tonight's focus really is going to be the world of the mysterious world of parallel compression. The reason why I wanted to do this was because it's kind of changed quite a bit for me just lately. I've been mixing a house kind of funk record recently for a client. Just finished mixing and mastering that, and client loves it. He's very happy with what he's got. And through the course of it, I began it because I needed to use a lot of parallel compression. And normally I reserve parallel compression for things like drums in particular, because parallel compression has this great way of just bringing drums really nice and forward, and you know, can really do things like get that kick drum to pound in your chest and the snare drum to slap you around the face. It's got real value with drums in particular. And a lot of people use parallel compression on drums, and there's lots and lots of videos out there on using parallel compression on drums in particular. Well, normally that's the way I've used it, and I've done that for years. You know, it's just that's what I do. I have my drums, you know, if it's like a funk tune or if it's got a backbeat, that's what I do. Drum bus, and I set up a parallel bus and compress the crap out of it, and hey presto, job done. And then you just blend it back in, and it sounds great. And I've never really progressed much beyond that. really, mostly because most of what I do is jazz or it's acoustic music. You don't tend to do much in the way of regular compression, let alone parallel compression in those kind of music forms, those kind of styles. So for me, it's kind of something that hasn't really changed a lot until I started doing this record. And so I have found myself doing parallel compression on a lot of things recently. So that's why I figured we should talk about it, because it's changed a lot for me. So I hope you guys are happy with that. Just Bob says, reminds me of sitting on my yacht that I do not own in the Caribbean, that I've never been to, drinking a drink out of a coconut. Yeah, Bobby says, Wednesday you talked that you were going to talk about parallel compression. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, that's what we're going to do. So, how have I applied it and how's it made a difference? First question, really, before that is, do you guys know what parallel compression is and how it works? Some of you will say yes, some of you will say no. Some of you might say, yes, I've heard of it, but I've never really used it. Well, tonight we're going to take one of my songs from my EP, and really it's not the kind of song where you would use a lot of parallel compression, but, you know, just for the sheer fun of it, we're going to use a lot of parallel compression, and we're going to see that you can completely overdo it and destroy a song, but we can also figure out ways in which, with this particular song that actually I've just played, you guys have all heard it, how we might apply some parallel compression to make certain elements come forward a bit. So I'm thinking, obviously drums, let's use some parallel compression on the drums. But I'm also thinking maybe we should try some parallel compression on vocals, maybe the horns. We can try all sorts of different things to bring different elements more forward in the mix. Maybe the backing vocals as well as the lead vocal. So yeah, so that's what we're going to do, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun, and we will learn when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, and when it works and when it doesn't, and when you can kind of go, okay, this is just not right for this. Dooley says, you record your acoustic set, right? What percentage of tunes do you use acoustic on? Oh, you mean my drums, my acoustic drums? Yes, actually, mostly it's acoustic drums, to be honest. Although sometimes I do replacement with some virtual drums sometimes. Like, in fact, the song that you just heard, the drums were recorded live, but unfortunately the quality of the recordings didn't sound great, but the performance of the recordings was fantastic. I really loved the performance played by my drummer Dave Lightly. And I really liked it, but I just didn't like the sounds that we got. The sounds just sounded, the recordings just sounded really lame and really tinny. It sounded like he was playing a drum set made out of biscuit tins, that kind of thing. So it didn't sound really great, and I didn't really want to spend hours mixing and trying all sorts of ninja tricks to kind of re-add some low end into it or re-add some low mids into it and all of that, because I think I would have ended up with something that was substandard. So what I did was I pretty much replaced his drum set, which is a Gretsch was it a Gretsch or was it a Ludwig? Ludwig 1964-ish, I think. 4-piece drum set. And so we just replaced it with a drum set that I found actually among my Native Instruments drums. And it just sounded, it sounded a perfect fit. It sounded like his drums should have been if they'd been recorded well. So, so I mean, the fact that they were recorded badly in the first place was my fault, because they sounded great, except I wasn't monitoring through the desk. Had I been monitoring through the desk, I'd have learned that they sounded terrible. So when I got them back home, they did sound terrible. So this is what we did. We just replaced it using various replacement techniques. And so the drums on this are samples, but played by a real drummer. Bobby says, yes, I've used it on rock songs, but that's just about it. Yes. Just Bob says, can you explain what parallel compression means? Certainly can do. Parallel compression, how about we maybe go to my screen? That might help. If I can remember what shortcut I've mapped my screen to, that might help. So let's do that. Let's get OBS out of the way. All right, so parallel compression is where you take a piece of audio and you make a copy of it. You can do this by duplication, or you can do this using a send, a pre-fader send. You make a copy of it, and then what you do is you compress the absolute living daylights out of that particular piece of audio, and then you blend that in with the uncompressed signal, or regularly compressed signal. So for example, on this drum track here, which is in pretty blue here, what I can do is I can add a bus. So I'm not going to do add bus for selected tracks, which is what I would normally do. I'm going to do add bus channel. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to color it red like all the rest. But I'm going to rename this. And just like every other mixing video using Studio One or Pro Tools or Cubase that you've ever seen, I'm going to call it P Drums. How unimaginative of me. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this guy all the way down. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to do add send to parallel drums. I'm going to make this pre-fader, then I'm going to control, is it control or shift click? I think it's control click, and that makes it a 0 dB, I think. No, shift click then. Control click, there we go, it's control click, I was just pressing the wrong button. So I control click it and it goes to 0 dB, so I want a full volume pre-fader copy sent over to this bus here. And sorry, I was just checking the chat over there. So this is kind of what it is. I'm sending a copy of my drum track here. If I solo my drum track and just play it from, let's go from verse 1. Now, there's a lot of room tone in that recording, so what we're going to do when we compress this, that room sound is going to pump like crazy, and it's going to sound loud. But you know what? That's okay, because what we want to do is we want to destroy this drum sound and blend the destroyed drum sound in with the just regularly compressed, because it does have some compression on here. Only a couple of dB of compression, just lightly kissing it essentially on my main drum bus, but I'm sending a copy over to this channel that is going to smash it. And then I'm going to blend this smashed version in with this normal version here. And that should, if we do everything correctly, what it should do is it should give the impression of these drums being much more up front and coming out of the speakers a bit. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to use the Fat Channel 1176 compressor to do it. So let's not go in the waves. Let's go to Presonus. And we're going to go down to Fat Channel and we're going to put it on this P bus. And we are going to select this guy here. We're going to go all buttons in. And then first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up to about there. And then I'm going to slam this guy. So let's go back and play this. Now this is not switched on yet. Now I've got it switched on. I'm going to set that about 12 o'clock, that one about 12 o'clock as well. And that needle is pretty much over all the time. In fact, no, actually I'm going to put that right across to 50 milliseconds. There we go, so that'll have it pumping when we turn this back up. Okay, so watch what happens now. If I go back to the start of the verse, I'm going to turn this guy up. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to actually solo this guy and turn that guy off. And I'm going to slowly fade this up so you hear just what we've done to it. So it sounds pretty horrible. And I could probably make it worse. There we go. And you can hear that room really come up. Okay. That's going to sound hideous. Now, the crash cymbals are going to pump maybe a little bit too much when they happen, because the compressor is going to be constantly grabbing and releasing, grabbing and releasing. And so the cymbals are going to go whoosh, whoosh, whoosh a little bit, which we don't want. So ordinarily I probably wouldn't use parallel compression on this song, which is why pretty much I didn't. But this is for experimental purposes only. So let's unsolo this. Let's pull that back down. Let's get the drums soloed. And we'll solo this guy as well. And we will play. I'll turn that up a bit. Okay, now let's get the rest of the mix in. Okay, that's pretty good. So let's get everything in and see what effect that has on the overall mix. And I'm staring at my phone. Don't have no plan. I can't wait for when you're home. There'll be wine and sweet. Oh, yes, you're saying you've lost the Studio One screen. Okay, I'll fix that. I don't know how that happened. Sorry about that. I have no idea how that happened. I hope you can see it now. Should be able to. Yeah, don't know how that happened. I think I know how that happened. It's because when I pressed the enter key when I was typing in P drums or something like that. Something like that must have happened. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, thanks guys. I will get the hang of this, don't worry. It's because I've only got one flipping monitor, that's half the problem. Okay, it's back, yeah, okay, good. Dooley says, so you are compressing the whole drum mix via a stereo bus. Yeah, kind of. It is a bus, it's a parallel bus, and I'm sending a copy of it. I'm not actually compressing the drum bus at all. The drum bus stays on its own, just normally EQ'd and normally compressed, and I basically make another bus and I could send it from the drum bus if I wanted to, but I send a pre-fader send to this extra bus, and this extra bus compresses the living daylights out of it, and we blend this really, really heavily compressed version in with the normal drum sound. So it's not like this is replacing this one. They're both working together. That's the idea. The idea is that they work together. So it works better on other styles of music rather than this. But unfortunately, I can't really play the mix of the record that I've just been working on because it's not been released yet. So yeah, sorry about that, guys, about losing the screen there. I don't know why that happened. It's probably got something to do with my shortcut key mapping for OBS, something like that. It just means that as soon as I hit the enter button, it switches the screen. So sorry about that. Show your pre-fader. My pre-fader is here. So when it's blue, it's post fader. And then when you click over here where it says pre-fader on off, when I click it, that turns on the pre-fader. So now the send is going before this fader. So the audio for this track is coming in, a copy is going from here straight over to here, as well as going through the fader to my drum bus. As you can see here, that's my routing. It's a stereo channel, so it's going input left right, then it's going drum bus over here, and then drum bus to main out. But a copy pre-fader is being sent over here to this guy here, and this is being blended in with this guy before it goes to the main. So Aaron says, so once you've created the P drums channel Did you drag that over to the original track? Drag what over to the original track? I put the fat channel on the parallel drums channel, this bus here, and it's this guy here that is doing the heavy compressing. As you can see, look, I've got the input set to minus 3.8 dB and the output about minus 25 and yeah, 25.76, all buttons in, which basically means it's more than 20:1 on the ratio. And then I set this for a moderate attack. I could set this for a fast attack if I wanted to. And then I set this to fast release. Although, to be honest, the 1176 is the fastest attack compressor around, more or less. I mean, the slowest it is 0.8 milliseconds, and the fastest is 0.02 milliseconds. So that's like 2 nanoseconds. You know, so at its fastest. So it's a fast attack compressor anyway. And Mike is here of Peace Valley Audio. He says hello. Good to see you, buddy. Welcome to the show. So the idea here is that we're using heavy compression on this parallel bus, which we blend in with the original drums here to give added weight and thickness, and to give the impression that the drums are coming forward in the mix a little. And, you know, in EDM or in something that's got 4 to the floor, like disco or something, if you've got 4 to the floor on the kick, parallel compress that kick drum, and that kick drum will pound out of your speakers in that way that it should do in that style of music. So, you know, I think this particular song, I would say parallel compression is probably not incredibly appropriate. I probably wouldn't ordinarily do it on this particular song. But as I say, there are reasons for that I can't really go into. Let's see. Let me think about this for a second. All right, let's just carry on. So I hope you guys are getting this. I hope you're understanding this so far. So the idea is that we're adding some volume and we're bringing something forward in the mix, and making it a bit thicker. So you can add thickness using parallel compression as well. So that's how you would do it on drums. And ordinarily, I would stop here. I would not do parallel processing on anything else. But it can really work a trick on vocals and give vocals a real sense of presence. So we're going to add another bus, and we're going to try this on the vocal on this song. You can use parallel compression on pretty much anything. In fact, there are some mix engineers who would parallel compress every element of their mix. So they would parallel compress the guitars, the keyboards, the bass, the drums, any percussion, anything. Sorry, just bashed the mic. They would compress pretty much anything. So, but really, as I say, I don't do that because I don't really work in those styles of music. I don't work in heavy rock. I don't really work in rock particularly, although I have done. I have mixed rock records, and yes, I use parallel compression, but mostly just on the drums. I didn't really do it anywhere else because, you know, I haven't really done that before until just recently, where I've been parallel compressing guitars, I've been parallel compressing the lead vocal, and it just sounds really great. And it's kind of a bit new using parallel compression in this way for me. So I wanted to share that with you guys so that you can, you know, you can kind of explore this for yourselves if you're not already using parallel compression. Hey, here's an idea. Maybe use it on a vocal, you know, instead of just, you know, having parallel compression just the domain of drums. So we're going to create another bus. So I'm going to add a bus channel, and I'm going to call this P-Vox bus. Now this is where I might lose you again, but hopefully not. And we're going to make this red. I used my other enter key, so that might have helped. So let's move this over next door to the vocal channel. As you can see, nothing on it. and I'm going to go, and now I could do this from the Vox bus, but I think I'm just going to do the same here. I'm going to do a parallel to my, sorry, not a parallel. I'm going to do a pre-fader send to this guy. Control click this now orange line to make it 0 dB, which it should be. Yes, it is. Now that's a copy of this vocal is now being sent over here to this guy here. And I'm going to grab the compressor. I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to grab the compressor settings from the parallel drums and drop it in here. And we're good to go. So I'm going to pull that down and we're all set. I'm going to solo up the vocal. I'm going to solo up this guy as well. We'll go from verse 1. Hang on a second. Dooley says, this is a stupid question. No, it isn't. No such thing as a stupid question. Isn't there a mix knob on the compressors? If so, why is parallel better? I'm not trying to be a smart ass. No, that's okay. Yes, you can do this using the mix knob on compressor plugins. You absolutely can. You just set that sucker to about 20%, smash the living daylights out of it, burn a Durante. You can absolutely do it that way. This is probably the old school method of doing it before plugin manufacturers started adding mix knobs to plugins. Most now do that. Most now have a mix knob, and of course with Studio One, of course you can do it using the splitter. You can absolutely do parallel compression using the splitter. That might be a method that we could show maybe towards the end of tonight. And you can certainly legitimately do it that way, and it may save some screen real estate. You're not having to maybe add another bus channel and, you know, go through quite so many steps. You just use the splitter function. Absolutely, do it that way. And oh, we're back in flipping. Yeah, we've gone out of the screen again. I don't know why it keeps doing that, but it is annoying. So I will show you again. This is fun, isn't it, guys? So I've basically gone pre-fader send from my lead vocal, and please note the very important track note there. Yeehaw, Jingle Bells, Batman Smells. That was put in when I was testing Studio One 4, and we were testing track notes, and I just wanted to see if track notes works, and so that's why I wrote that. Okay, so pre-fader send 0 dB all the way across over here to this PVox bus, and I grabbed the compressor settings from the P drums and dropped it in here, so it is exactly the same kind of hoo-ha with the input, the output, and the fast release and the sort of in the middle-ish attack. Like I said, I could put that all the way across to fast if I want to. Doesn't really matter too terribly much, except I want it to pump like crazy. Here's what I want to do. So, okay, hopefully this is going to sound good. It might not sound good for this style of music, but hopefully this will give you the idea of what this can do. And I'm staring at my phone. Don't got no plan. I can't wait for when you're home. There'll be... Okay, cool. Let's take this out of solo because context is what matters here. So let's just back it up to the bar before. Here I am, and I'm staring at my phone. Don't got no plan. I can't wait for when you're home. There'll be wine and sweet recline. Alright, so that sounds pretty good. It's made the vocal a little bit more forward. Now, if I was to solo this guy on its own, you can hear pretty much what it's done to this vocal channel. Here I am, and I'm staring at my phone. Don't got no plan. I can't wait for when you're home. Yeah, pretty hideous. It really actually sounds quite oppressive because you can really hear the compressor slamming down on those louder notes. Just really absolutely slamming. It sounds really quite oppressive. And that's good. That's what I want. I want to utterly destroy the sound in order to blend it in and give the impression of something that is much more upfront. Here I am, and I'm staring at my phone. Don't have no plan. I can't wait for when you're home. There'll be wine and sweet recline. Okay, so there you go. That's parallel vocals. Now I could do parallel horns here as well, and I could maybe even do parallel on the soprano saxophone. You know, different elements that I want to bring forward, but I think maybe you guys get the idea. Dooley says you should monitor the whole feed with a tablet or your phone to see what we're seeing. Yes, I actually am. I'm forgetting to look at it. Because there is a delay between what I'm doing here and what you guys see on YouTube. What you're seeing on YouTube is about 10 seconds after what actually happens in real life here in my studio in Edinburgh. So it's bizarre, the YouTube delay. So I'm kind of glancing over to it every now and then just to make sure it's working properly. And probably the time that I glanced over, it was fine. And when I looked back at the Studio One screen to do what I was doing, in between that time, it switched. So it's got to be the way I've got things mapped out. I think I think I know what it is. It's the key shortcut I've got for applying the transition between scenes. I have that mapped to enter, which basically means if I press any enter key, it's going to switch the scene, whether I like it or not. So I maybe need to find another key that will do that and will not affect Studio One. So that's something for me to work on for next week. So there you go. Yes, YouTube is a time machine. Just Bob says, is running a wide open compression bad on CPU? Nope. I've just added, what, 2 extra fat channels and we're still hovering around about 15%. Now, if you're using something that's a little bit heavier in terms of processing requirements, maybe you're using something from Waves or you're using something from Slate Digital, then yes, I would suggest that probably if you're using the Slate Digital 1176, I would suggest that that might be a little bit heavier on CPU, especially if you're doing, you know, several parallel channels and you're using the same thing, you're using the virtual mix rack on each one, then yeah, it might clog up your CPU. Which is why I use the PreSonus Fat Channel, because it hardly uses any processing power at all. So at this point, I think I am going to switch back to my view. There we go. Because I think we're pretty much done. I think you guys get the idea, and we can always go back to Studio One if we need to, if you guys have got any other questions. Mike's got some great advice here. He says, I use F11 through 17 to manage my transitions in OBS. Maybe look into those. That's a good idea. Yes, I do have the editor's keys keyboard. You're quite correct. I do. It's like mine only goes F1 to F12. And all of those are taken up with Studio One shortcuts. So I don't know how we're going to get around that. Are we staying on topic with questions? Yeah, if you guys have got some questions on parallel compression just now, we'll deal with those. But if you also have any other questions to do with mixing, mastering, recording, songwriting, getting into the session work industry, whatever it is you guys have got, I will take those questions too. Paul Lucas is here. Good to see you. And he says, does it matter if your bus is stereo or mono when you parallel processing a mono signal? Well, buses in Studio One pretty much are stereo, even if it's got a mono channel to it. So if we go back to the screen, we will see that is true. Pretty much all buses are stereo. I do have some, like this vocal has just my voice on it. It's essentially got a mono signal feeding it. The solo bus here has the soprano sax just feeding it, so that's mono. The keys bus has the piano and the Fender Rhodes feeding it. The bass bus just has just the bass feeding it. Yeah. So I don't think it matters. The bus is a stereo bus anyway. Whether it's got a mono signal feeding it or not, I don't think. I think it always remains stereo. You can change the channel. You can change the condition of it if you really want to. I don't. I just tend to leave them. But you can change. You can switch a channel mode to mono if you really want to. How about how far are you away from your speakers? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Dooley. Jody Rudolph is here. Jody says, would it be correct to say there is never a time to always use parallel compression, but it should be sometimes to try out and see how it sounds in most cases? I would say parallel compression is one of those things which is going to be, some genres are going to be better for it than others. So if you're doing a lot of funk or a lot of rock or house, disco, you know, any of those dance style genres, or heavy metal or screamo or rap, any of those I would say would be, those kind of styles are going to suit parallel compression better than maybe jazz or classical or you know, small band music or Irish folk music or tin whistle music. That's not really going to suit parallel compression. I really don't think you would be parallel compressing a fiddle in an Irish folk band. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't. But by all means, experiment with it and see what it does. You know, you might actually be the next great mix engineer that creates a brand new effect, a brand new sound that you know, that changes how we mix Irish folk music. Who knows? It could work. It could do something really, really cool to how the fiddle sounds. Try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, then, you know, lose it. Like, for example, in this song, it doesn't really work because it's the wrong style of music for parallel compression. Yes, it does bring the drums a bit more forward, but it doesn't really do much for the vocal, I don't think. I think the vocal is forward enough. And if that's the case, then I would just delete the parallel channel. Experiment done. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really improve the sound. It doesn't really make the mix any better. You know, there are other styles of music, as I say, where it would, and in this case it doesn't. So yeah, so I hope that kind of answers that question at least. Orange Shackman says, we get the Plugin Alliance bundle when we purchase Studio One 3.5, 4, etc. I'm getting a message on a lot of the Plugin Alliance plugs that says please activate. What's the process to get all of the bundles and plugins that come with the software? I know about the promo code now, but I'm after the fact. Those Sample Magic, I think they're called Sample Magic bundles that come with some of the interfaces and some of the mixes that PreSonus make. You basically have to go to Plugin Alliance or whichever particular vendor it is that supplies that particular plugin, and you need to sign up with them, and you need to have the correct license key, and you have to activate it. You can do that I think you can do that when you drag the plugin into Studio One. It should come up with a dialog box and you just stick the license key in there, I think is how it goes. Or it might be a username and a password, and it should just activate. Like, for example, the whole Sparkle thing. I've just downloaded Sparkle just recently. I don't even know if I have it in Studio One 4. I need to go look. I don't even know who makes the darn thing. I guess I'm gonna have to find out. Or at least I thought I had downloaded it. I can't find it. It's not here. Unless it's listed in instruments. Is it listed in instruments? Folks, help me out here. Ah, there it is. VG Sparkle. Okay. I don't think I've actually activated this yet. So this could be interesting. Let's go do a new song. This might cripple my CPU to do this because I don't have a whole lot. But we're gonna try. Let's get the old sparkly doodah in here. And we get the spinny wheel. We still have the spinny wheel. Okay. I'm not entirely convinced this is working. Other than the fact, I think it's... yeah, it's Crash Studio One. Well, it kind of made my CPU go up ridiculously there. And it's telling me I got the trial version, and I've forgotten the password that I used. Hang on just a minute, folks. Bear with me. I don't seem to recall the password that I used. I'm going to try and find it out. What was the password I used? I think that was it, but I'm not sure. Oh, okay. There we go. It worked. Ha ha ha! That was the correct password. And of course you guys didn't see that because I wasn't sure whether the password was correct or not. But I can go back now to screen like that. Okay, so we got Sparkle. That was basically one of those times where you have to put in a username and a password. You'll find that there are other plugins that that are different. That, you know, you have to put in an authorization code. I haven't even used this yet, guys. So one thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to update plugin thumbnail. There we go. So I know what it is. And I'm sure this is all rather excellent. I'm not going to demo this now because it's kind of outside of the remit of this show. We've only got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to close that song. Do you want to save changes? No, I don't. There we go. And we're back to this song, which is perfect. We're going to go back to lounge. Yeah, I need to remap all of these transitions now, which is annoying. But still. There it is. And I think it's just one key I need to remap. Mike is being very, very funny. Let's see. Okay, you guys got any other questions? We've got about 9 minutes left of the show before we need to wrap up for tonight. But if you guys have got questions, we will keep going. Just Bob says, before compression was invented, how did they control and balance sound as well as they did back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, cymbals in particular? Now, you see, what they did back then was, it was all to do with where you placed the instruments, actually placed them in the room. So, instruments that needed to be quite loud and quite upfront, you would literally position closer to the, if we're talking 1920s, closer to the horn, which is like, you know, if you've looked at a gramophone, if you've ever seen a picture of a gramophone, you've been to a museum where they have a gramophone and they have like this big horn thing that the sound is played out of. Well, in the recording studios in the 20s, they had a horn that did the opposite. Instead of playing sound out of it, it would take the sound in, and the cutting stylus would move appropriately according to what this horn heard, effectively. So instruments that needed to be louder than everything else would be placed near the front of this horn. And then if you had a loud instrument that was going to make the cutting stylus jump too much, you would put that further at the back of the room. And that's how they did it. Drum kits in the 1920s were much smaller and were nowhere near as loud as they are now. Nowhere near. They were still fairly loud, but they were nowhere near as loud. And the way they were played was very different to the way they're played now. So there are those kind of considerations to take into account as well. So it's not just about the technological advancement of recording techniques and mixing techniques, but it's also how instruments were played at the time that is changed. But that is a super question, actually. I mean, compressors didn't really start coming in until maybe the very end of the 1940s and into the 1950s. And they weren't really compressors in the same way that we know them. They weren't really, they didn't really have an attack and release setting on them, at least not at first. At first, they were basically just an automatic way to control the volume. So you had a knob that you turned, and that set the threshold for the limiter is what they were. They were limiters, they weren't compressors, which is why if you look on one of the early versions of the LA2 compressor, you will see that it says limiting amplifier. And that's effectively what compressors were in the 1950s in particular and onwards. So you didn't really have an attack and release at that point. They came a little bit later when, engineers started to add a little bit more control. Well, actually, now that we've told this automatic volume machine when to turn down, perhaps it would be a good idea if we could control how fast it did that, and then how fast it then returns it to its original volume afterwards. So that's where attack and release came in, and so that's how the modern compressor as we know it was born. So did they do parallel compression back then? No, they didn't, because the music that required parallel compression didn't exist. So parallel compression is a relatively modern mixing technique. It's not something that was necessarily practiced in the 1960s, maybe. But compressors were definitely used, but you were limited to how many compressors you had because they were very, very expensive. And then you could only use them on one channel at a time. So, there are a lot of limits that we don't have now. I mean, we can slam, an LA2 on every channel in our mix. If we've got 100 channels, we can put, if our CPU will allow it, we can put 100 LA2 compressors on our channels. Well, you know what? Back in the SSL console days, everybody would like, oh man, I wish I could do that. And now, of course, we can, because we've got the plugins to do it. And it doesn't cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, to have 100 LA2s in your studio. So that's very, very cool. Okay, you guys are talking about copying each other, which is hilarious. I need to actually scroll up because I think I've missed something. Yeah. Hang on. You guys are talking and I'm missing what you're saying. Anything about VIP? Yeah, VIP, unfortunately, yeah, we've got a bit of a problem with a part of it which is preventing us from launching it at the moment, because at the moment it works, but it kind of lets you in for free, which is not ideal. So we're trying to fix that, and we're talking with the guys at PayPal to try and fix that as well. Launching VIP was supposed to have been happening this month, but unfortunately we've had to kind of abandon that until we can get this really rather serious problem fixed, because I don't want to have a free VIP, I'm afraid. I'd much rather that it was a paid kind of concept. So, albeit the price is low. Jody says, I just purchased your HRME MIDI drums made easy set and was wondering if you had any recommendations on using those lessons with Studio One 4 as opposed to what you taught it on. Well, actually, I taught that on Studio One 3, so yes, the same things will work on Studio One 4, and when Studio One 5 comes out in the future, it will work on that too, and it will work on Studio One 6 and so on. It should work on anything. You should be able to do it in any DAW, because that was the idea. The idea was to create something that was generic about working with MIDI and not just about working with MIDI in Studio One. Studio One is what I use, but you could do it in Pro Tools, you could do it in GarageBand, you could do it in Audacity. I don't think you could do it in Audacity because I don't think that has MIDI, but certainly you could do it in Logic Pro. You could use Cubase, Mixcraft, I think. You could probably do it in Reaper. You could definitely do it in Reaper. So yeah, it doesn't matter really what DAW you use. Let me go down and see what I'm missing, because I might be missing something here. And Mike is helping out, which is very cool. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Just Bob says, so you could delay chain limiter knobs together to suppress and release sound to boost a suppressed signal. So you could daisy chain, sorry. You could daisy chain limiter knobs together to suppress and release sounds to boost a suppressed signal. I think what you mean there is, can I put a compressor after a compressor? Is that right? Let me know if that's right, because if that's what you mean, then yes, you can certainly compress after a compressor. And I'm just going to check whether I did that with this song. I don't think I did. Oh, I did, but I think, did I use this as a DS? Let me check. Yes, I did. Yes, I did use that as a DS. But yes, you can. And actually, my MO for vocal mixing, pretty much, generally speaking, would be an LA2 into an 1176. Is kind of what I do. Sometimes I do it the other way around. Sometimes it's an 1176 into an LA2. And actually, it kind of doesn't really matter for me anyway which way round those two compressors go. I mean, it'll do something different. You know, if you have the 1176 up front, it's very fast at attack and very fast at release. It's just a fast compressor. And then, so if you go into that first, you're going to get a lot of the transient hit, and then when that comes out of the 1176 and into something like an LA2, which is much smoother compressor, then you can use the 1176 to compress the transient, and then you can use the LA2 to compress the body and get some more warmth and tone out of the body of the signal. And I like to do that with vocals. In particular, I really like to do that with female vocals. I get a lot of success with that out of female vocals. But it works on a male vocal as well. And it really works in a rock context or in a funk context. It really works very nicely. You can have it working in a jazz context as well. Depends on the style of song. If it's something that's fast and you know, maybe sort of like bebop tempo, and you know, if the vocal is kind of, you know, has a lot of different dynamic ranges, then yes, that can work in a jazz context, and I would do that. But yeah, I'm not sure that that's necessarily what you're talking about. But if it is, there you go, there's your answer. But if it isn't, I've just answered a question you haven't asked. Orange Shaman says, can this process you're talking about tonight run side by side with the vocal thickening process? Yes, it can. It absolutely can. Yes, the vocal thickening trick, as taught by my good friend Warren Hewitt, he does it in Pro Tools. My other good friend David Mood takes that idea and shows you how you can do it in Studio One. It's a great little technique. Again, it's a little bit more genre specific. I wouldn't do it because I really don't need to in the style of music that I'm working in for the most part. However, you know, if I'm working in something that's, you know, quite aggressive, like, you know, maybe something like, I think Warren is doing, has done some live mixing videos where he's live mixed on a live stream on YouTube a song by a group called Little Empire, and the vocal on there, I think he uses the vocal thickening trick, and it really works on that particular song. So if I was mixing that song, I would definitely use that. But you know, for something like Chanel, no, I don't need it. But yes, you can parallel compress and use the vocal thickening trick at the same time. You just have to be a little bit careful how you do it so that you don't end up with something that is so thick it sounds muddy. So you're going to have to be careful with A, how much compression you're using, how you blend that parallel compression into your vocal thickened sound, and then you're just going to have to be a little bit careful with you know, places like the low mids and that kind of thing, and you know, around that 250 to 650 hertz range in the vocal track. You're just going to be careful with it, otherwise it will build up. And you know, yes, you're adding some thickness, and some body, but do you really want, you know, too much of that kind of frequency range? Because it'll start to sound muddy after a while. Dooley says, I would like to see a lesson on using the two compressors on vocals, just like you said. Well, yeah, I can certainly do that. I'll either do a video on that, or maybe we can do that on a live stream. Woodbeast is here. He says, I just popped in to say hello and we'll catch replay. Good to see you, Woodbeast, and thank you for coming, and thank you for coming on the replay. I appreciate that. And Orange says that makes a lot of sense. That's good. Just Bob says, I apologize for asking oddball questions. This is how I get an understanding of the equipment I'm using. Learn through association. You know what? Just Bob, on my channel, on my live streams, really, so long as the questions are on topic, i.e. they are broadly to do with mixing, mastering, recording, songwriting, and all of those kind of things that my channel is about, there's no such thing as an oddball question. But, you know, as soon as you start asking why the Cadbury's Flake is the crumbliest chocolate bar in the world, and how infuriating it is that those crumbles, even if you're fully clothed and wearing a shirt, how those flakes end up in your belly button, that would be an oddball question that I would probably overlook accidentally. Sort of accidentally anyway. But yes, those are the kind of things that, yeah, that would be oddball. Or if you're asking about, you know, the appropriateness or not of cloning a sheep, or even eating an entire sheep, whether that's appropriate, that would be an oddball question too. And I'm the only one that's allowed to ask myself oddball questions. Let's see. Oren says, what in your opinion is the best way to send my father tracks that he can load into his Pro Tools DAW? Well, you're in luck, because now we have with Studio One 4, we have the ability to do pretty much just that. My good friend Marcus Huskins just recently did a video on that very thing, where you can import and export AAF files to and from Studio One, to and from Pro Tools. He does a great video. He has Pro Tools, I do not. So he was able to make that video. I did think actually that I might go on the Avid website and download Pro Tools first. You know, the free version of Pro Tools, which they call Pro Tools first, just to see if I could actually get this whole AAF thing to work. Haven't done it yet, haven't got around to doing it. Marcus beat me to it, and he already has Pro Tools. He has Pro Tools 2018, I believe. And so he showed how you could do that, and it's very, very well worth watching, because he tells you, he explains in great detail kind of what the plus points of this particular file type are, and what the downsides of this particular file type are, and what works, what comes across from Pro Tools to Studio One, and what doesn't, and kind of why, and why it's not actually PreSonus's fault, and it's not actually Avid's fault either. Some of it is just to do with the file type and the fact that you're sharing from one DAW to another, and really the file type is maybe not designed for that to be taking place, but you can actually do it, and so therefore, you know, PreSonus created the ability for you to be able to do it, but it's not perfect. And that's to do with the kind of like the foibles of the file type. Some of it is, there is a bug in Pro Tools 2018. Marcus talks about that. That means that certain elements, I think, of automation don't come through like they should. And that's a bug with Pro Tools. So Avid, I hope you fix that if you're watching. Avid probably won't. But yes. Oh gosh, how do I spell Marcus's name? It's Huyskyn's, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Dooley has the oddball question of the night. Why do you not like PG Tips? Actually, I do like PG Tips. I just don't drink it very often. There we go. Just Bob says, no more run around with Dropbox or Google for file sharing. No, you can still use those, and I still do. I use pretty much Dropbox for all of my file sharing with my clients. You know, if they have stems to send me, they send me the stems, and I mix and I send it back. And I use Dropbox to do that. Now, if I'm sharing, if they have Pro Tools and they want to share, if they want to send me the Pro Tools session, they can do that by sending me the AAF. They can do that, and I can open that up in Studio One, and I can do whatever I need to that way. But as I say, it's not perfect. So really, if it is just, hey, can you mix my song, I will say send me the stems, because stems are DAW agnostic. They're just pieces of audio file. Just send me the pieces of audio file. I will mix. I will send the stereo 2-track back to you. That's, you know, so that works. And if I'm doing session work, a lot of studios that I send session work to, they do not use Studio One. They use Pro Tools. So oftentimes what I will ask them for is I will ask them for a stereo 2-track file with the song without any roughed out bass parts, and I would ask them to send me also a second stereo track with their roughed out bass track, because their roughed out bass track will give me an idea of what they want stylistically, and then, you know, I can use that to create my bass part, and then I send my bass part back to them minus all the stereo 2 tracks they've sent me. They just get the raw naked bass part, and then they do with it what they want after that. So yes, Dropbox works beautifully for those kind of things. Just Bob says, got it, was just thinking S1 users might have been able to set up a sharing account within S1. Well, yes, you can actually do that. I'm going to show you that very, very quickly, because we are already quarter past 1, so I'm aware that time is over. Hang on a second. let's go back over here. And yes, you can set up Dropbox within Studio One, and that is exactly how I use Studio One for session work. Okay, so in my Files tab over here, I have access to my OS disk. That's my C drive. I've got all of these folders here that I've got access to. And in particular, I have access to my Dropbox folder, if I can find it. There it is, Dropbox. And so I have various folders for various clients, as you can see. Pete Lowe Colors of the Night album. I've been mixing that, and I've also been playing on it a little bit. I do some stuff for my kids' primary school as well. So I send audio tracks there when I need to. I also mix church sermons. I collaborate with a few people. But yeah, if I want to send stuff to somebody, like if it's just a song that they want me to play on, I have a particular folder. In this case, I've just called it client folder, just to, you know, for the sake of protecting the identity of my clients. And I put whatever they want in here. So here I've got bass mix. That refers to a particular song that I worked on. And basically, the way it works, let me do a new song. And I can kind of show you the way it works. Let me close this song. Don't want to save my changes. No, I don't. Because I really actually don't. I'm going to open this track here. And this is pretty much going to be the last question of the night, folks. So I'm going to go into my files. There we are. Client folder. Here's this particular piece of music. All right. Pretty rough, ready, and awful. This is pretty much the first thing I tested. This is my test song for setting stuff up in the studio here in my new studio space. So let's say I want to send this Fender Rhodes track to my client. So here it is on its own. There's not a lot to it, but it doesn't matter. Alright, so let's say I want to send it off. So this is my track. I'm sending this to my client. I just grab it and drag it. Boink. Done. And then my client can go into the folder and they can extract it when it's loaded, when it's uploaded to Dropbox. And then they can just extract it, take it out, put it into their DAW, whatever it is that they use. And hey presto, they have their bass track, and then they send me money if they're happy with it. And you know, usually what I charge is I charge 50% up front. I say, give me 50%, then I'll put the track down, and then I'll send the track to you. If you're happy with it, send me the other 50%, job done. And I do that pretty much every day. All right, so I hope that helps. And we're going to transition back here. I can't get my shortcut keys to work, so we're having to do it this way, which is annoying, to say the least. But there it is. I hope that helps everybody. And I hope everybody is happy with all of that. So we are at 1:15 in the morning, folks, so I'm going to pretty much wrap it up there. And I think we had, I don't know, about 14, 15 people here, which is a little bit less than last week's show. We had over 20. I think we had 24 or 25 last week. So it'd be nice if we could build a bit more of an audience. Admittedly, I didn't really advertise this until 45 minutes before showtime. That's my fault. However, I will say pretty much, unless I say otherwise, or unless I announce otherwise, there is always going to be a Sunday Night Live right here at 6 p.m. Central Time. Okay, regardless of whether it's summer, winter, spring, fall, whatever. Okay, unless I announce otherwise, there will be a show. Now, if Christmas was to fall, Christmas Eve or Christmas Day was to fall on a Sunday, I will not be doing a show. But otherwise, I pretty much will. Unless I happen to have accidentally heard a Krista Berg song, in which case I might be traumatized for a few days, and that might mean I might not be able to do a show. But other than that, I think pretty much there will always be a show here. Okay, so with that said, if you would be so very kind to do me a favor to hit the like button, which is there somewhere, I think. If you go hit that like button, that'd help. And if you think my streams are good and you like them, you get a lot of value out of them, please share my channel about and let folk know that I do have this live stream show that's on a Sunday at 6 p.m. All right. So with that said, thanks very much, everybody, for coming. And I will see you on Wednesday over at Johnny's channel for Songwriting Simplified. I have no idea what the talking point is going to be for that show. But I think we had an idea in the last show, actually, and I'll need to review that show. I have to go and watch it and try and remind myself what that was. And so I'll see you Wednesday, 6 p.m. over on Johnny's channel for Songwriting Simplified. So until then, good night.